Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to ZoomZoomers on the 5th July 2021. I'll just start letting people in. I'm Damien Cross at DC_F1 on Twitter. People may already know me, and hopefully you'll see a few familiar faces tonight as I let them in. It'll just take a few seconds for them all to turn up. I can see Near, I can see Simon, I can see some familiar faces there. I'm just going to go through a few of you guys. I know it's a smaller crowd tonight, but we're just going to go through a few of you as I see them on screen now and let in people as they arrive. Near, can I take your name and your Twitter handle, please?
Hi, it's Near Khan, N-I-R underscore Khan, K-A-H-N, Near underscore Khan. It's normally written on the screen. You've confused me by coming to me first. At Near underscore Khan.
Near underscore Khan. Surely you should be able to remember that. You're not Alan Bradley. We can talk about Alan because he's not going to be about tonight, which is quite nice. Craig, can I take your name and your Twitter handle, please?
Yep, you had me join in whilst I had a mouthful of beer, so I'll have another swig.
That's all right, it gives me a sec.
Oh. Yes, I'm Craig Willard. I'm a freelance motorsport journalist and also a historian. And I'm at Craig _Willard. I could just about remember mine, yeah.
Yeah, so far I've had Near Khan and Craig Willard, and your Twitter handles are your names, and you've struggled with that. So Simon, let's hope you can remember yours as well. Can I take your name and your Twitter handle, please?
Hi there, yeah, I'm Simon Browse, and originally I'm at Cybrowse at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
At Cybrowse, is that all one word? Is there an underscore in there somewhere?
Underscore on the Twitter one. Everywhere else is just my name.
Gotcha. Thanks for that, Simon. Chris.
I was muted, sorry.
Right.
Chris Hughes, marketing PR manager for the Persia Sport Club, amongst other things, general automotive person for hire. And my Twitter handle is at Chris H Drives.
Chris H Drives, great. Joe.
Joe Tanner. My Twitter and Instagram handle doesn't include my name at all, so I don't have to remember how to spell my own name. At Stuff About Cars, which kind of does what it says on the tin.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Richard.
Hello, I'm Richard Gooding. I'm a freelance motoring writer and graphic designer, and my Twitter handle has got my name in, and it's at richgooding.com. At
richgooding.com. Excellent. So does richgooding.com is a real thing then? Or is that just an email address?
No, richgooding.com is.
Oh, so you decided to have richgooding.com as your Twitter handle?
Richgooding.com gone, I think. I don't know.
All right.
It correlates
LA.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm not very organised. That's why I'm usually always late, because I'm usually just faffing with everything. So
you usually are the last one in. Yeah.
Always late to the party. You've got to make a grand entrance, right? And well, I just thought I might as well just faff live, eh? Why not? So I'm LA Wilshaw, and my Twitter handle is, I don't even remember. What is it?
It's written on your Zoom, so we can see it here at @1_LA.
There it is. Familiar? It's all right. I've only had it for 12 years. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Have you got a drink there, LA?
I actually don't. Maybe that's what the problem is. I'm just on like juice, so maybe I should get one.
Yeah. I think that's what the problem is, isn't it? Well, we've got a guest coming up later in about half an hour talking about unexceptional cars, ordinary cars from the 70s and 80s, and you guys have been sort of tasked with that during the week. I'm not sure if that kind of went under the radar because there's been a bit of discussion on the DM group. Yeah, LA is completely flummoxed by this, but have a think, if you haven't already, about some normal cars from your childhood or your younger years, which kind of resonated. And while we're kind of thinking about that, I'm going to welcome in Cami. So Cami, can I take your name and your Twitter handle, please?
Hello, my name's Cami, and my Twitter handle is Cami Racing.
Cami Racing, excellent. So racing, as in, well, you've been doing sim racing. You're back on iRacing, from what I could see.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that. Haven't been on iRacing for a year. Wasn't an amazing race, but it was my first race in a year, so.
That's all right. I was hoping you weren't going to creep back too soon, because my iRating has been creeping up towards yours. But then I got bitten last week and it's dropped again. So I was kind of hoping I'd get on a par with you at some point. But now that you're back, I'm sure it's going to be.
It dropped a little bit. So.
Oh, did it? What was it? Just for those of you who don't know, iRating, obviously you get a score to match you with similar levels.
Yeah, essentially it's at your aggregate driver performance number. Mine's 2,200. Fordzilla want me to get it up to 3,000.
Oh, okay.
Sort of a target thing for September. Yeah, it will be, especially as I've been out of the loop of iRacing for a year and have been doing Assetto Corsa Competizione.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck with that. We'll be following your progress. And back in Formula 3, is it?
Yeah. I'm trying my hand at various open wheelers, see what sticks. What was your iRating then?
Oh, I got it up to about the same as Toby. I got to 217 something, I think. But then
okay.
I'm in the twos. Well, I'm not at the moment. I've dropped into the 19s. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. I feel confident I'll get back into the twos when I have a few clean races. But talking of racing, we'll go back to the real world. Craig, I know you're on mute at the moment, but I'm going to turn to you because we have just had I've had quite a lot of Grand Prix since the last ZoomZoomers. We might as well talk about those because we've just got off the back of 3 races in a row. And it's sort of changed how I guess we view the championship standings and everything like that because we've got a new contender emerging.
Yeah, very much so. Back to back races, Paul Ricard and then Austria 2. And Max Verstappen won all of them. So the championship's over now. He's going to walk away with it, clearly.
Well, that's the red green questions later. So we'll save that for then. But it does look like he's doing all right, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, well, I think Paul Ricard was the biggest sort of telling point because that's been Mercedes' stranglehold for the past couple of years that they've run there. And Verstappen beat Hamilton on the day. Some arguments over strategies, but I think Max had them covered. And then, Red Bull have traditionally been pretty strong at the Red Bull Ring in past years, but there were so commanding drives from Max those weekends. Just absolutely walked away really with it. And the triple headers come and gone in a blur, and now we've got a nice weekend gap before Silverstone. And yeah, it's just been sort of just all blurring into one at this point. But yeah, it's certainly looking pretty good for Max at the moment. We've got a handy championship lead. There's a plane flies over my house. Some interesting results up and down the field. Lando Norris was absolutely sensational over the weekend, nearly nabbing pole position off Max, and could have beaten both Mercedes in the race as well, if not for a rather harsh penalty, to be fair. Still nabbed the podium, is 3rd in Formula 1, I think it is. I should know this. But yeah, so yeah, really, really good drive from him. George Russell perilously close to scoring points once again, after being overtaken by Fernando Alonso with 3 laps to go last weekend. And yeah, just generally some okay races. Paul Ricard was pretty good, if I remember rightly. But yeah, the other 2 have been sort of so, I suppose. I've been sort of busy being engrossed in other championships as well. Some of the junior ranks, W Series getting going again, and Formula 3 back in action at Ricard and the second Red Bull round.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll chat in a moment to LA about some of those junior championships and the stars from those. But Craig, you might be able to explain better than I could what changes we can expect at Silverstone in terms of qualifying, because this is going to be something completely new.
Yeah. So qualifying is going to be determined by a race, for which the grid will be determined by qualifying session. If that makes sense.
So it's going to be a qualifying, but yeah, it's for a race.
So the weekend format is now you can have free practice 1, and then qualifying is going to be late on Friday night or evening, whatever. Obviously, it won't be night; it won't be under lights. But Friday evening, and then you're going to have a sprint race in place of where qualifying would have been on the Saturday, which will be, I think, about a third of the race distance of what the Grand Prix will be. and the results of that will determine the grid for Sunday's race. The top three finishes in the sprint qualifying will get points, 3, 2, 1 based on the top three. The winner of that will be officially credited with pole position for all of the record books for all eternity, much to the dismay of historians everywhere. And yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting trial. I would like to see it implemented at one of the more boring circuits like Yas Marina, but rather than one of the more exciting venues, because I mean, of course it's going to be decent because Silverstone is generally pretty decent. So yeah, I'd like to have seen it tried out at a more boring circuit than the ones that they're supposed to be trying it out at.
Fair enough. Well, it's worth giving something a go. I mean, I think qualifying is one of the parts of Formula One that it's kind of managed to get right over the last 10 years. It's not been too bad. There's always action on track. It's still quite unpredictable because if you make a mistake in Q1, you're out. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's good to see that they're trying to innovate, but we have seen in the past sometimes these innovations backfire terribly, and it's hard to know until you actually run it in real life and the race strategy guys get involved that you kind of go, oh yeah, obvious that was going to happen. But we will see. So the sprint race then, where you get a couple of points if you do well, that won't go down as a race win. That'll just go down as you getting pole position. As far as from a historian's point of view, you won't credit that as a Formula One race win. And similarly, would you credit the qualifying for that sprint race, so the Friday night qualifying, would you qualify that as a pole position, or is that not going to go down as a pole?
Officially, that won't go down as pole position, no, even though you were fastest in the qualifying session.
Okay.
Confusingly.
Fair enough. Yeah, fastest in qualifying. You haven't got pole. Right, gotcha. But yeah, we kind of spoke a little bit to Cammy about Formula 3 very briefly, and then you mentioned it again there. I'm going to turn to LA because you're kind of my girl now for the support series for Formula 1, and of course that's mainly Formula 2, Formula E, and Formula 3, and of course W Series now. Have you been able to kind of keep a track of what's going on and seen any kind of stories emerging from that?
We haven't had a Formula 2 race since our last Zoomers, so there isn't actually a race weekend to talk about. But quite briefly, touching on the Formula 1, we had a great Formula 2 2020 reunion on Friday in free practice 1 session. Of course, you have Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin and Tsunoda, who already have their Formula 1 seats. But then we had Callum Ilott coming in the AlphaTauri, and Guan Yu Zhou, who got his first crack at the whip of the Alpine, and then Roy Nissany for Williams, who's put in a few sessions previously. But I think we all know the Haas car in Formula 1 is struggling a little bit, and the reasons, and it has emerged recently that there's a weight issue with Mazepin's car, and apparently it's heavier than Mick Schumacher's, which is making him look slightly worse anyway. But the emerging sort of little bit from that is that Callum Ilott actually was fast. He was 16th fastest, which is ahead of Nissany and ahead of the other, certainly not Tsunoda. He's off, he's down the road, he's gone. but Schumacher and Mazepin, and then Guan Yu Zhou was 14th fastest in the Alpine, which is incredible, especially for Guan Yu Zhou, with it being his first go. So that's kind of emerged from Friday, even though there's been no Formula 2. But yeah, W Series, I mean, that's definitely Craig's territory. I'm really new to W Series, but I did watch, the first 2 races, and again, it was, back to back Austria. So I actually found the first race a bit more exciting, and they had sort of the safety car come out, and there was a massive shuffle after that safety car incident, and then there was a couple of cars hit each other, and then that changed everything, and we had our reigning champion, even though it was a previous year, not last year, of Jamie Chadwick, you know, coming through the field there, battling away, taking advantage of that safety car, and finishing in a very respectable position, you know, despite her little incident there on the track with Jess Hawkins, which kind of sent her spiraling down the back. But yeah, there was a bit of an incident with a front wing coming off one of the girls' cars. So there's been talks about safety, and you know, nothing really was addressed regarding that. You know, and it could have been a very different story. The front wing came off and it literally flipped and went straight in the air, and luckily avoided the other two sort of, and then the third one a bit further back, avoided those. But yeah, you know, there's again, there's a massive age difference with some of those girls in the W Series, and you know, one of the oldest girls, and there's a bit of ageism around, isn't there, sometimes, that perhaps shouldn't be. She's doing incredibly well, and then one of the really young girls, you know, is doing incredibly too. So I think that I'm really, really happy for these girls that they're getting the platform that they deserve. You know, it is harder for girls in sport, for women in motorsport. It always has been. And without sort of beating on a drum that people might kind of roll their eyes at and think, oh, here they go again, you know, just do your job and race. It's not quite that easy, and it's not quite that simple. It's quite intricate reasons for women not being as successful as men in motorsport. But with these little tiny pockets of women getting opportunities, you know, including the FIA Girls on Track program and the W Series, and this magnificent opportunity to support Formula One, which they almost got last year. They almost got 2 races last year. They were given the USA, Austin and Mexico, but that didn't happen because of COVID. But yeah, they've eventually got all their races for all the support, all the F1 support. And you know, come on girls, let's get your elbows out and let's show everyone what you can do.
Exactly. It's a lot of it is about visibility and inspiring the next generation to realize that there's a place for women behind the driver's seat, or in the driver's seat behind the steering wheel. And it's actively doing that. You mentioned names like Jess kind of getting involved in a tussle, but of course she's doing touring cars now in the UK as well, British Touring Car Championship. So if anyone's used to getting banging doors, if there were such things on W Series cars, then it would be Jess. But it's great to see more and more of these people kind of cropping up in all walks of motorsport. But I'll leave motorsport there, and before we start talking about unexceptional cars and things like that, we'll talk about fast cars and hypercars, for example, sports cars, supercars, and weirdly, I'm going to actually lead that with talking about Peugeot and my Peugeot man, Chris. What's going on here? Because aren't Peugeot going to be releasing something supersonic
tomorrow? Is the launch of their new hypercar. So in the FIA WEC championship, and it should be really exciting, because it's you know, Peugeot have been pretty successful with endurance racing in the past with 905, 908, and it should be really exciting. I'm obviously looking forward to it. I think it's going to be, you know, there's more brands joining the hypercar series being announced all the time, so it should be really good, I think.
So this is intended to take on some of the more established names in hypercar production then on track.
Yeah, so there's Toyota is the big one. Aston Martin were going to be joining the group with a version of their Valkyrie or Valhalla or whatever it's called.
Valkyrie, yeah.
Valkyrie, yeah, I thought it was. And but that's now been dropped, I think. I don't think they're going to be racing it, and they're doing it as a one of these sort of hyper private track only cars like Ferrari's FXX series. But there will be others joining. Audi are, I think, coming back, and there are rumors of McLaren and Porsche also joining the hypercar. So yeah, it should be really interesting. And then there's the little teams like Glickenhaus, who have already got their car, you know, out and racing, which is amazing, I think, for such a a tiny little team to compete against major, massive manufacturers, I think is awesome. And they're the other ones that I'm supporting because you've got to support the underdog, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've obviously got an affection for Peugeot, but this isn't, not being rude, this isn't the sort of thing you'd normally expect from them. But they have had a lot of success recently in Le Mans, and they've been competitive. And actually, motorsport generally, Peugeot's been pretty good over the decades, hasn't it?
They seem to pick and choose things. So they'll do Le Mans endurance racing for a bit, and then they'll take a break from that and do rallying for a bit, and then they'll take a break from that and do Pikes Peak, or they'll do Dakar or whatever it is. And I quite like the fact that they don't just stick to one thing, and they have a go at different things throughout the years, and over the years have been very successful at everything that they've gone to. So I think for the fans it's massive. It's also nice that they are gearing this with their new Peugeot Sport engineered road brand. They've just launched 508 PSE, which is this new hybrid 400 brake horsepower version of the 508, which it's their first sort of foray into performance green motoring. So it's kind of interesting that they've got the racing aspect now, which is going to have the same sort of hybrid sort of systems, and actually racing with it. And then there's a road tie-in as well, and hopefully that will lead to more cars for people like myself, enthusiasts to get behind. I'm actually quite looking forward to seeing what they do with regards to a replacement to 208 GTI, because they have said that they won't be a direct replacement. So it's going to probably be an all-electric hot hatch. Renault have just announced that they're going to be doing an Alpine version of the Renault 5 that we saw as concept form is going to be coming out as a production car, and there'll be a high-performance version of that, electric version of that. So I think it's interesting to see what's going to happen with these cars, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's exciting time to be a car enthusiast.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
With Peugeot, I think it's more interesting in the context of Stellantis, because they're now part of a group with 25,000 different brands, and they've chosen that it's going to be Peugeot that's doing the hypercar. It could have been any of the others, and I'm just thinking it's the only Stellantis brand that's doing it. It could have been Lancia, it could have been Alfa Romeo, it could have been Maserati, it could have been any of these other brands in the group. It's interesting that they've chosen Peugeot for this.
I hope that it's going to stay like that, so that Peugeot will be sort of Le Mans endurance racing, and maybe they'll bring Lancia back as a rally brand, and then they'll have Alfa Romeo as their sort of Formula One and that sort of thing. And that would be, how cool would that be? Like just have those brands back and racing.
Peugeot could do all that though. Peugeot it wasn't that long ago you were in Formula One with McLaren and
no, that's true.
Because Peugeot's done all these different things. I say it is interesting exactly in that context of seeing, okay, this is what Peugeot is going to do. And as you say, that leaves Lancia to do the rallying, it leaves DS as the electric brand in Formula E, and it leaves Alfa Romeo on the track kind of thing. So it's interesting.
How many F1 championships did Peugeot engines win in Formula One?
Oh, that's a test.
Pretty sure it's 0, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure it's 0.
They just burst into flames.
I think their best position was second with a Jordan Peugeot at, I think it might have even been Silverstone.
Yeah, I think Jordan Peugeot may have nabbed a couple of podiums, and McLaren Peugeot probably nabbed a podium or two with Mika Hakkinen as well in '94. But yeah, certainly no world championships, and I don't think anyone's either.
Anything with Prost, because it was Prost Peugeot as well, wasn't it?
Alain Prost apparently said they were a nightmare to work with.
They had a funny firing order, I think, on their engine, which made them sound weird as well.
Yeah, wasn't it Olivier Panis one with Prost at
it was Ligier.
With a push?
That was Ligier still.
That was Ligier moving on.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, Honda.
But that engine went into the 905, which obviously did go on to win Le Mans. So
It was a winning engine. It just didn't have the right car yet.
Yeah.
So that's good to know. Peugeot obviously been in British Touring Car Championship as well. Didn't quite do so well there either, but they're still really, they've been in everything. Peugeot's just been everywhere. It's fantastic. But to go back to a point you made a little while ago, or a suggestion that you made was about like the Renault, the Renault 5. And I saw Sai was nodding along very enthusiastically at the thought of this Renault. Is this something that kind of gets you excited then, Simon?
100%, a fast EV-esque Renault 5, homage, for want of another word. That's incredibly exciting. I think that, I personally think that the Zoe in particular is massively underrated, but to give that kind of a retro edge, a bit like what Peugeot was doing with their recent concept, which I really hope gets out quickly, if at all. I think that's exactly what Renault needs. Something small, sporty, that harks a little bit back to the past, but still very much looking at an EV future. Very exciting.
Can I just
It is
ask,
very
what are your thoughts on the whole fact that they've killed Renault Sport and that Alpine will be the performance arm? Because I feel a little bit like, as a hot hatch fan, like they built up Renault Sport, they've got this great following, and then they had Alpine as a sports car brand, and they're now going to do a hot hatch. I mean, I know it's been branded Alpine in the past, but that was a very long time ago. Hot hatch Alpine, and then there's also going to be, dare I say, an SUV Alpine, which to me just sounds horrible.
Yeah, I'd say I totally agree. I completely agree, and I think most people will know, Alpine as let's say non-car folk will know or think of Alpine as a brand, not necessarily a sporting arm. Can you imagine going down to your dealership and buying an AMG? You don't. You buy a Mercedes. So now you're trying to brand fast Mercedes as an AMG only. I don't think it works. I think that everyone knows sporting arms of cars, like Volvo Polestar. They used to be, Polestar was your quick Volvo. They were not a separate brand. Now it's split off into something EV fast. Everyone's doing the same thing. I totally agree. I think it's a real shame that Renault Sport's been effectively killed off and not going to be used anymore, because everyone knew that as that's your quick Renault rather than a separate brand. I don't know. It's a bit like DS. Does it need to exist? I'm not sure.
And I'd throw Cupra in there as well. I'm a bit confused with the whole Cupra thing. And you go, yeah, okay, I get what you're doing, but isn't it just people are just going to constantly say, "Oh, it's just a Seat," though, isn't it? And you go, "Oh, it's a Cupra." Well, yeah, I don't quite get it. But before we move on, I can't help noticing that we've got another guest arrived. So just trying to tap into the special guest slot, which we're actually reserving for someone else right now. So a regular Zoomer, but if you could let us know your name and your Twitter handle, please, Neil.
Hello, I'm late arriving Neil Briscoe, and I'm a motoring journalist, and you can find me on Twitter at Neil M. Briscoe. Hi, everyone.
Excellent. Hello. Do you have any thoughts about the mock-ups that we're seeing of the Renault 5, the new Renault 5 EV?
Yes, I desperately want one, particularly the Alpine version. I totally get what you're saying, mate, but I mean, part of my love for Alpine comes from having kind of vaguely gotten to know David Tuig, who, like me, is from Cork, but unlike me, designs wonderful cars and engineers them. And he did the Zoe, he did the original Qashqai, and he did the Alpine 110, and the guy's just genius, and what he did with that 110 is amazing. So on that basis, I'm really fine with the whole Alpine replacing Renault Sport thing, because I don't think the Renault Sport thing ever really flew. It did with a really tiny coterie of enthusiasts, but clearly not enough. Yeah, I know, and me, but and the fact that they're going to promote Alpine through F1 and through Le Mans and through presumably other channels as well, and the fact that it's going to be an all-electric brand, I think that's really exciting. So yeah, I've opened up a post office savings account.
I think I can sum it up the way Clarkson summed it up, of someone saying they've bought a George shirt. No, it's an Asda shirt. You bought your shirt from Asda. That's Alpine, Cupra, DS.
But I'd be quite happy to have a Renault anyway, because
I thought you were going to say happy to have a George shirt.
Well, this is from Dunn Stores. I mean, come on, who are you talking to here? I'm not the fashionable person here.
Who's the fashionable person here? I mean, look at us.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry, LA. Sorry.
Near appears to be wearing
This is 100% charity shop. Thank
Shots
you.
fired there. Shots fired. Oof. Oof. Ah.
Well, I tell you what,
Vote to kick. Vote to kick. Vote to kick.
we've got a guest coming in very soon. But before we do that, let's have a red-green round. If you guys happen to have some reds and greens stuff to hand, we'll whiz through some stuff and then we'll let our guest in. LA's dressed in green, but hopefully we've got some red and green stuff. Cammy's frantically going around. If you want us to wait a minute, if not, you can just do thumbs up, Cammy, or thumbs down if you prefer.
I can never do the lips.
Yeah, why do I?
The dress.
Every week, every month, I know it's coming, and then I'm like, oh, I'll find red and green.
Oh,
Although
red
I
and
did
green.
buy yesterday at Brands Hatch a little for red Ferrari.
See, this is the joys.
Okay.
This is the joys of having a 2-year-old son. Is I've always got access to toy cars. And
We
they're
all
easy-
have, mate. We all.
They're scattered. They're
You
scattered
don't
all
need
over
a
the house.
2-year-old
so
son to have toy cars.
Oh dear. Okay, question number one. Back to Formula One now. Max Verstappen will win the championship. Is it unanimous? No. LA still. Who are you holding out for? LA. Lewis.
Yeah, I still think he'll come back. I still think there's circuits that'll suit them and him and the car will upgrade. And so, yeah, I just want to go against the grain.
Okay, fair enough. Next one. George Russell will be at Mercedes next year, as in Mercedes, the proper Mercedes team, not some sort of sub team.
Did LA say go against the grain or go against the green?
Oh,
Either.
both the same. Everyone thinks George, with the twinkle in his eye and the affection towards Toto Wolff right now, will be at Mercedes next year. Okay. Next one. I like champagne. I mean, you'd think it's a fairly simple one, but actually,
I
I don't think
prefer
I've ever
Carver.
tasted.
you prefer Carver.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one. I like energy drinks. Nobody, even though they fund potentially the championship-winning team in the Premier.
No, I
Motorsport
need to be
Series.
careful. I've,
I think it's an age thing.
looking for a job with one of them. So
Oh, okay. Green then, LA. Quick.
Tastes
Okay.
like fizzy alcohol.
It does a bit, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, next one. Dark chocolate is greater than milk chocolate.
White chocolate better than them all.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Cammy.
Fair.
Yes, very much.
I agree.
Milky Bar.
Okay, next one. Steering wheels must be circular.
Just none of that Tesla nonsense. But
Yeah. Not
Oh,
necessarily
yeah.
circular, but they have to be continuous.
Nia,
Okay.
why? Why, Nia? Why?
Because I don't mind steering wheels that are a little bit squared off in some sections, but it has to be a continuous surface, otherwise it's useless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the
there's
only
bits that are
exception is
missing.
Kit 2000.
Which is impossible to drive.
But our vehicle designer said no as well.
Yeah, I mean, flat bottoms that there's room for your knees or whatever is okay, and it can be a little bit off round, but the whole yoke thing doesn't work. Not on a road car anyway; it just doesn't work.
It's stupid. Well, I think they should not be circular necessarily, but yeah, continuous. I think that'd be good. Okay, next one. Mainly for the English people in the room. Football's coming home.
Who cares?
Do we tempt
Sorry.
fate?
I was debating whether to put this one in or not.
I'm going to be on the train during the final.
How are you?
Because I'm off to Donington this weekend for the British GT.
Yeah.
And I just when I booked my trains and that, I totally sort of just didn't cross my mind that there might be a football match on at 8 o'clock.
I'd actually get off the train, go to a pub somewhere, and then get back on it when it's finished.
Yeah.
The problem is if I do that, I'm going to end up at getting at home at about 3 o'clock in the morning because of how trains work, and then I'll just have to get some dodgy night buses or something like that. So I've got plenty of data. I'll just watch on my phone.
Well, you sound quite experienced.
Trains will have Wi-Fi.
Yeah, trains will have Wi-Fi nowadays. Yeah. Okay, next one.
There's no engines. I don't get it. I don't see the.
I thought you meant trains.
Yeah.
No, football. I just don't get it.
Okay. And there's yellow flags though.
Right, yeah.
They hold them up. Okay. Next one. 1990s modified max power style cars will make a comeback.
Hmm.
Split,
I think-
split.
Yeah, I
for
think
the simple reason that everything eventually makes a comeback.
Yeah.
They kind of are.
Does this
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
we approve of it, or that we think it might happen?
It's not approval. It's just whether it might happen.
I think it's already happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're heading into 90s nostalgia decade, so this is gonna happen.
Okay.
Does Neil have a deal with Kleenex?
I love Neil's Kleenex.
I wonder if he's got like a sponsorship deal and he's just subtly.
It's an empty box.
Yeah.
We should all be worried.
Oh,
Because if you signed a deal with Kleenex, the first thing you do is go, "I'll put it on ZoomZoomers."
Neil,
Yeah.
Oh
why?
wow.
I'm worried
I
Neil
do
has
not
Kleenex by a computer.
I'm in the kitchen. The Kleenex was on the shelf. It was the only green thing I could find.
Officer.
Okay.
Officer, matron.
Next one. Flying cars, and I don't mean helicopters and airplanes. I mean flying cars, stuff that you drive and then they take off. Near's already in. Flying
There's
cars
no
will
such thing as
never
a flying
happen.
car.
So I said flying cars will never happen, but actually you've jumped the gun and gone red when actually I think you probably, if you think they will never happen, you want to go green. Richard's looking confused now. Flying cars will never happen. Yeah, I don't see the point of flying cars. It's just have a car or have a helicopter. It's just what
It's actually much simpler than that.
Never-
There's absolutely no way to pass the regulations of both at the same time. It's either a car or it's an airplane. You have to choose.
People are rubbish at driving cars. Kind of
No,
those
no,
people
nothing
in flying
that's gonna-
machines.
Exactly. Nothing that's going to pass an actual genuine homologation crash test is going to be able to take off. Not
It's all
not
IVA,
that kind of
isn't
way.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all individual IVA, small production runs of stuff.
But beyond that, there's just no point. We have flying cars. They're called helicopters.
Yeah. Okay, final question before we turn to the guest. Fiat should only make small cars.
Ooh,
No, I want a Chroma.
You want a Chroma?
No, I think
And
they
a
should do a new Fiat Coupe or something.
Oh,
that's a
okay.
small car, though. I
That's a
I
small
owned
car.
on that. I was like,
but-
Fiat Coupes, X19s, things like that. They're still small cars.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
thinking just
Still
means
want- I still want a
Pandas and
Chroma.
500s. Okay, they should stick to generally small cars.
Okay, so they shouldn't do big cars, is what I'm saying. So Fiat,
They did a 500 XL, didn't they? And it looks hideous.
With
yeah.
the one exception, they can bring back the 130 Coupe if they really want to.
Fair enough. Well, talking about Fiat, it sort of leads me and talking about Chroma, the Fiat Chroma, kind of leads me on to unexceptional cars and cars that perhaps deserve a bit more credit if they've managed to survive this long. And I'm just going to let our guest in, which is Ian Seabrook. So Ian, hopefully in a few moments, will have connected to audio and he'll be able to hear us. Ian, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah, excellent. Ian, if you wouldn't mind letting us know your name and your Twitter handle, that'd be fantastic.
Oh, hold on. I've just got to kill off the YouTube one.
Oh, yeah, because there'll be a bit of an echo.
Yeah, right, there we go. I am Ian Seabrook. On Twitter, I am HubNutVids.
HubNutVids, and that gives a bit of a clue towards your YouTube channel.
Yes, which tends to be about the more unexceptional side of motoring.
Okay, so how would you define unexceptional motoring then?
For me, it's kind of the forgotten family favourites of yesteryear. So it's the cars that just don't get the exposure. So, we've got Chris here. So as much as I love Peugeot 205 GTIs, I tend towards the lesser models just because no one ever talks about those. And I think they're almost as much fun.
Yeah, and I think there's something also remarkable about knowing someone's put the effort in to get these through an MOT every year, rather
Yeah.
than just going, it's just not worth it. So you get these cars, which are perhaps now still only, Gavin Braithwaite-Smith had a Renault Safran that he bought for 200 quid. And
Mhm.
that's a fantastic car for 200 quid, but people throw them in the bin because they cost too much to keep going. But if they have been kept going, then it's fantastic. And I guess that's what you're all about.
Yeah. And, I'm full of admiration for people who see something a bit unspecial and think, I want to preserve that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was, I can't remember, but one of our previous guests once said that a car doesn't know that it's not worth a lot anymore, or something along those lines.
Mm.
I think it might be, his name's, Joe, on Twitter is Joe Hallenbach.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I think he said that, if you buy an S-Class Mercedes, it doesn't know it's not worth £80,000 anymore. It just, that's what it's worth.
Mm.
And that trickles down to the everyday cars. Like Neil mentioned a Fiat Chroma. It's like, oh yeah, Fiat Chroma. It's these
Yeah.
stuff that they're kind of like you just forget about. And I love seeing them when they come past on the roads, and seeing them when they're in good condition and everything as well. And we see things like Chris Pollock with his Not Too Grand, which he insists is different from the Bangonomics side of things, which is all about motoring on zero money or as cheap as you can possibly be. The Not Too Grand philosophy is you can get a fantastic car for £2,000. Where do you kind of sit on that spectrum? Is it all about getting a fantastic car for not a lot of money, or getting a car that you could run and basically not lose any money on? Or where's your kind of take on the whole thing?
I guess I aspire to Bangonomics, but I like cars so much I can't really bring myself to drive them entirely into the ground. So I end up spending far too much money on them, selling them at a loss, and then I get something else. So yeah, I can't do Bangonomics. It just doesn't work for me.
No. So I guess Bangonomics, from my limited understanding, is about getting the car and not worrying about it dying because it only cost you a couple of £100 to begin with. Is that kind of the idea there?
Yeah. If you get a big bill, unexpected bill, it's goodbye car and move on. And I see the appeal of that, especially when you can buy a car for what a monthly payment costs on a new car.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I just can't send cars to the scrapyard. I'm not very good at doing that.
No, you're very much a hands-on person, aren't you? If something needs doing to a car.
Yeah, I try to be. I would never claim to be an expert, and I think most of my sort of followers on the channel know what to expect. This isn't instructional stuff. This is a bloke desperately trying to keep his cars going, occasionally with the help of people like lovely Simon Browse here.
So Simon's worked with you in the past. Has he just kind of lent a hand, or have you tinkered with his amazing collection of classics?
I have seen his collection and have not had time to play with it because we were so busy taking my Invacar apart and trying to fix it so I could get to Goodwood to do a lap of the track down there. So he was absolutely essential to that all happening.
Oh, in an Invacar was that? You did a lap of
Goodwood? An Invacar, yeah.
These are the sort of adventures I absolutely love. I love hearing stuff like this.
Yeah,
it's
and it isn't really about the car necessarily. It's about the adventures you have in it. So even an ordinary car, you can have fantastic adventures in.
And it leads me on, as some people will probably expect, to talk about the upcoming Festival of the Unexceptional.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be there, and you're taking a car that I'd forgotten about again. But what car are you taking along to the festival?
I'm taking my 1999 Daewoo Matiz.
Okay, so this isn't a special edition or some sort of rid.
No, it's actually the base model you could get in the UK in 1999, which is when I bought it new.
Yeah,
I owned it for 18 months, sold it because I just typically got bored. But then 18 years later, I managed to find it and buy it back.
Okay.
It's just been through a restoration. I've had the sills, all the bad metal cut out, the wheel arch repaired, even a bit of fresh paint. So she's looking better than she has done for a long time.
Yeah. We actually, when my sister turned 17, we bought her one collectively as a family,
mm-hmm.
and that was her present. And I remember when she opened the garage and the car was there presented with ribbons, and she's like, "Is that it?" oh, thanks. It was the color of a Crunchy. It was that orange metallic.
Lovely copper orange.
So she sold that quite quickly and got a Rover 45 because what does she know?
Oh, so... to be fair, actually, when I bought my Daewoo Matiz back, I bought a Rover 45 on the same day.
No, the two are somehow linked, aren't they?
Yeah, the two cars go together quite well. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, fantastic to have you here as a guest. One thing that every guest has to do, which I haven't told you yet, I'm dropping this on you now, and other people will know, is take part in a little thing we call the Track Day Own Scrap Wheel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to have like a Wheel of Fortune thing going on. So usual rules apply. If one of you guys can give me a thumbs up when you see the Track Day Own Scrap Wheel, I can see a few thumbs up. I'm going to spin this 3 times, and it will generate 3 different vehicles. And as you'd expect, kind of snog, marry, avoid type of thing. One, track day, 1 day only. You get to take it on track. 1 you get to own, keep for the rest of your life. And 1, obviously, scrap. goes on the scrap heap. So I'm going to spin this 3 times, and then we'll have a think about what you've got. So your first car, Ian. Oh wow! Start is a not your normal fare. It's a Celine S7.
Mm-hmm.
So a decent one to begin with.
Yeah.
Car number 2 is I don't know if you can see how clearly you can see this. It comes up for me before you, but that's
That looks
a
Bentley shaped.
It's Bentley shaped. Now, one of the other guys will probably shout out which Bentley this is, but I think it's some sort of GT Continental.
It's a new
It's a
Continental
new
GT.
Continental GT. Okay, so we've got a Celine, we've got a Continental GT, and your third car, a TVR. Which one's that? Is that a
Sagaris,
Tuscan?
I think, isn't it?
Sagaris.
Yeah.
Sagaris.
If that's how you
Wow.
pronounce it.
There you go. So you've got the Celine, the Bentley, and a TVR. Track day, own, or scrap.
Right.
What do you reckon?
Oh dear. This is going to be quite an interesting one because, as I said, I can't even scrap a rubbish car, let alone a really, really nice car. So, what have we got? The Celine, Bentley, and a TVR. The Celine certainly looks like the track candidate out of that lot, I think.
So track day, the Celine, and we've got to keep either the TVR or the Bentley and scrap the other one.
I think just because the TVR story is so fascinating, I don't see how you could say no to a TVR. It's a company that achieved so much more than really it ever should have. So from building what everyone wrote off as kit cars to sort of through the 80s into the 90s, some of the most desirable sports cars you could imagine with some incredible style. And I think the Sagaris comes right at the end of that sort of run. So I'm definitely keeping that one. So it's unfortunate news for Bentley, I'm afraid.
I love the idea of having you sat there after your track day in the Celine, and you've got the TVR and the Bentley in front of you going, oh, throw that Bentley away. I'm keeping the TVR.
Yeah.
Fantastic news. Yeah, great stuff. Just
Only Ian Seabrook can scrap a Bentley and keep a car called Trevor. Fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. So you'll be there on at the festival on the 31st of July. And when what kind of cars are you hoping to see there?
Thoroughly ordinary ones. I know there's going to be other Deus there. Hopefully an Espero and I think a Nexia as well, which are the first models we saw from Deu in the UK. But really, absolutely anything. I've seen some amazing cars at that show, like a Fiat 128 Estate, exceedingly rare. And my friend Mike won with a Boris Marina Estate one year. My mate, another friend Gavin, won with a Fiat 127. So you're never entirely sure what's going to turn up.
So you talk about winning. That's obviously part of the show is the Concorde de l'Ordinaire, which is for people who want to really show off the car. So it's the day.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Okay,
no.
Okay. You're just turning up and kind of joining the rest of the unexceptional cars.
Yeah, I mean, I have cleaned it, but I wouldn't say the repairs have been quite of a concourse level.
I even sent you some cleaning products.
You did, and it's looking splendid. So thank you.
What did you send him, Chris?
Oh, I'm doing a little bit of work for a company called Moonshine, and I've sent Ian some products to review, just honest review. The great thing about Ian is he's one of us. He's a car enthusiast and will try stuff himself, whether it works or not. He'll give it a go. And I think that's why your channel is so successful, mate. Is because you're one of us. You give it a go. You'll try stuff that, you know, a lot of us are probably a bit scared to try on our own cars. And I think that's why your channel is so successful.
Oh, thank you. That video is going to be out tomorrow. So there will be some Deumitis buffing going on tomorrow.
How often do you release videos at the moment then? Is there a regular kind of...
Oh, there has never been a set anything really on the channel. Stuff isn't scripted. It's all very, very... I hate to use the word, but it is very organic. It's just making it up on the fly a lot of the time. So sometimes I'll be posting daily. Sometimes it'll be a bit of a break like there has this weekend because I've actually rediscovered the fact there are other things in the world. So that was nice to actually have some time off. But you have to keep pumping them out. And I think if you're looking to become a YouTuber, that's something you've got to be prepared for. You're not going to make much money per video. So make a lot of videos.
How
One
long have you been
one
at it
thing
now?
I've really missed during COVID. One thing I've really missed during COVID is watching Ian's walk around the Classic Motor Show every year, because it's fantastic. He has an insider like knowledge of cars which you've completely forgotten about or know nothing about, and he can tell you every little last detail. And it's one of the highlights of the year for me is watching Ian's videos as he wanders around in the morning before everyone else is up, as everyone's setting up their stalls. He takes a wander around, just him and his camera, and just tells you, this is this. It was built in 1968 by Brian, and you know, and I love it, and I miss it. And it's nearly 3 now, isn't it, that we haven't been to?
Yeah. Yeah, and they're so much fun to do, and I get so many angry comments from people who like sporty Fords and sports cars, because I'll go walking past a load of Porsches just to talk about an Austin Maxi, because it's the Maxi that interests me. I remember Maxis from my childhood. I don't really remember Porsches that often. You see one about maybe, but you know, I was more excited the first time I saw a 5-door Austin Metro as a child. I was a bit weird.
But not weird at all. I think it appeals to a lot of people, and that's where the success has come from. If you want content about Porsche, there's plenty out there.
Exactly.
But if you want content about Austin Maxis, it's kind of you, Steph from iDriver Classic, and maybe there's there's a few of you out there now, but you kind of cornered that market, I think. And how long have you been at it now? Has it been about 10 years that you've been doing this now?
Not quite. It'll be 8 years this autumn since I put the first video out, just as a hobby, just as something to do, and this is the weird thing. Hubnut began with a road test of a Nissan Leaf.
Did it really?
Because I had one and I wanted to capture the moment, me driving an electric car for the first time, and that's how it began. So it's always just been me and my experiences.
So for anyone out there who wants to start creating content on YouTube, what kind of advice could you give them? Because I guess it takes a while to get the momentum. It takes years of regular content posting, and you can't lose heart in it. You've just got to keep with it, and then it starts to pick up, doesn't it? So what kind of advice could you give to people who want to perhaps have a go at this?
The main advice, and this is something I still do to this day, is to make the content you want to watch. So I have to be interested in my own videos, if you see what I mean. So it's content that I can't necessarily find anywhere else. So there aren't very many reviews out there of a Morris Marina with a 6-cylinder engine like the ones they built in Australia. And to discover cars like that and drive them and experience them, it's just sheer joy. So you have to be passionate about your subject, because people will respond to that. And you have to be making what you want to watch, because your love for it will come through. And if you're trying to jump on the I want to road test Ferraris bandwagon, there's plenty of people doing that. So follow your niche.
Exactly. We see it all the time, those of us on Twitter, with the comments from, say, the Toyota PR team, for example, talking about YouTubers and the like wanting to test drive the new Supra and stuff. But so you mentioned, I think yourself mentioned recently, that you have lots of offers from people wanting you to drive their cars. Have I made that up, or was that something that you did?
No, I started a new list in March, because the old list had got so out of date, because people spent 2 years sending me offers. And since March, I've now up to about 70 cars again that people have offered me test drives on, including Chris and his lovely Peugeot 205 GTI, which I still haven't got to drive.
And the rest of the fleet as well. You're very welcome to drive. I'm now up to 5, so.
Yeah, and Simon's got quite the fleet as well, of course. And I haven't managed to come back and have a play with any of those either. And some astonishing cars that people know nothing about. No one here really knows anything about Pierce Arrow. And it'd be lovely to shine a light on those sort of American pioneers.
Oh, Hubnut in a Cadillac. Oh, that's a series.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, I'm definitely up for that.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. So in the modern day, actually, I'll leave you there for a minute, Ian. I'm going to switch to Richard now. In the modern era, the modern cars, are these ordinary cars of today going to be met with the same fondness, do you think, in 20, 30 years' time? Will people kind of go, oh, yeah, my dad had a Citroen C3, or is that kind of lost back in the 70s, 80s, perhaps even the 90s? Do you think there's that kind of the cars of today could survive that long and have that kind of fondness?
I don't know, to be honest. From my point of view, maybe not. I mean, I don't think cars are as built well now as they were even 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. So I don't know. I would think not off the top of my head.
Do you think that maybe cars now are, there's a lot of technology in cars, and part of the appeal, I guess, of cars, everyday cars, 70s and 80s, is that if you've got a hammer and a bit of elbow grease, you can probably keep them going. Whereas, like I mentioned, a Citroen C3, you know, is there any point? You're not going to tinker away, I don't think, with it unless you've got a laptop and all the tools required for that particular model. Do you think maybe the cars of a generation or so ago are more appealing because you can tinker away with them in the garage a bit more than you can modern cars?
You might be able to a little bit, yeah. I mean, the thing that worries me, I say it quite often to friends and that is the interiors of cars now are either all screens or very nearly all screens. And I always say, you know, what about if that went wrong? Because it doesn't just serve one function anymore. It serves several functions. So if you've lost that, then you've kind of lost everything.
Yeah.
And that's going to make those cars rarer though, because they're harder to keep going. You can't keep them going on a shoestring like we used to when we were young. I'm absolutely certain that in 20 odd years time, my kids are going to be walking around some classic car show and they're going to see a Citroen Cactus and they're going to grab their kids and they're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, your grandma used to have one of those. Because it's, as if the fact that it has just that one bloody touchscreen in the middle of it, it means that there's not going to be that many of them left. And it's, you know, there are certain cars that still are going to have that. You know, my dad had one of those things going about.
That's quite different too, though, as well, because that just looks very different.
It was maybe not the best example because maybe it was too obvious an example of something that is going to kind of grab attention. But you know, even just an ordinary C3 or whatever it might be.
Do you think we'll perhaps get to a point where in, you know, beyond 20 years, 30, 40, 50 years time, there'll be more cars from the 70s and 80s than there are from the early 2000s then? Because it's so hard to, well, and expensive and not worth the effort to maintain a car from 2010, whereas a car from 1970 is fairly easy to maintain. Could we see a point where the least populous vehicles are the ones from around the turn of the millennium?
I think it is possible. I mean, you take something like a Hyundai Ioniq or something like that today, which are really pretty common. They're absolutely everywhere. But that's not going to be a car that's going to be easy for a student to run on a shoestring in 20 years' time. In 25 years' time, you're not going to see, there's not going to be any left at all. Whereas people are going to be still hunting down another pet subject example, like your Fiat Multiplas and stuff like that, which are fairly easy to keep going. I can certainly see the possibility that in 25 years' time, there'll be more Fiat Multiplas still running around than there are Hyundai Ioniqs.
Yeah, definitely. Simon, do you think that we'll see skills that you need to maintain these classic cars disappear? I mean, a lot of the modern vehicles do rely on technology, computers, laptops, you know, Googling what's wrong. But if you need to manufacture a piece out of aluminium and that kind of thing, well, are those skills likely to disappear though? Are we going to see, you know, making it harder to maintain some of these older vehicles?
I don't think so. I think Neil will probably agree with me that we will always have an abundance of software. Mm-hmm. Software is nothing without hardware. So there's always going to need to be skills to manufacture the things that the software lives in. Software is what we, you know, have to process everything for us, but it's the hardware that we're tactile with all the time. So I think the knowledge of specific, you know, if we're talking about cars, so specific cars, the way that specific designs of chassis and the way that they'll put together, those memories and knowledge will fade away. But the skills of remanufacturing things, no. I think that there's huge bodies now, like the, you know, the Association of Motor Heritage. There's lots of kind of I don't know. I guess you call it sort of teaching centres now that are being set up to help the young people and any age really to carry on the techniques of the past, and they seem to be growing in popularity. So no, I don't think so. And I think with the advent of the internet, if you want knowledge, you could just look back. As long as everything's written down somewhere, you can always revert back to that. That's never going to be deleted. So no, I truly hope not. But sorry, Chris.
We've seen it in the Peugeot Club with a lot of our newer members are young people who have decided to not go down the newer car route, but have gone buying a Peugeot 205 or a 306, sort of the last of the generation where you still can tinker on stuff yourself and it's relatively simple, because they want that experience. I mean, there's two lads that live down my way who've both got non-GTI 205s, who they bought when they were 17 and 18, come to Peugeot Festival with me, convoy up with the GTI, and these guys are proper hands-on, doing up their cars themselves, spending what little money that they're making, on learning skills and trying to do up their cars on a shoestring. And I think there's a resurgence in that sort of thing. Like you said, the association that you mentioned there, Simon, I forgot what the heritage engineering, what they're doing. That's definitely coming back and in a big way, and people are wanting to learn those skills again, because it will die out otherwise. And despite the fact that we're going towards this electric route, the British classic car industry is worth a huge amount of money to the UK. They're not going to want to let that die, despite electric cars. There's too much money for the UK in classic cars for that to ever happen.
Yeah, I see a parallel between the classic car movement and that joy of driving and tinkering and that kind of thing. It's sort of what I see in the world of in marketing. We deal with a lot of young photographers, and they absolutely love the old equipment, the 35mm cameras and that kind of thing. I know some people on the call here, Nia, for example, that kind of passion for the mechanical camera cannot be replaced by the digital camera. It's always a hobby that's going to exist, isn't it? And that kind of that's still going to exist with cars as well as it does with photography, music, with LPs and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think exactly. I mean, I just recently sold. I had a Nikon F401, 35mm SLR that I hadn't touched for at least 10 years. And it was just collecting dust here, and I was like, I'll put it on Marketplace and I'll see if I can sell it. I could have sold it 30 times. I could have sold it 30 times over. The number of messages that I got, and you're fighting each other for it, because there's a sudden thing now of taking 35mm photographs, and it's hard to get the film, and people are having to develop it themselves, and it's become this whole new kind of cool thing for the Instagram generation. They've got so used to just clicking buttons and doing filters and stuff to actually learn how to develop film and to how to take proper photos. So it's the same with watches, mechanical watches, and people. There's still people who their hobby is to take watches apart and put them back together and stuff like that. Cars will be exactly the same. Including, despite what I said before, the more complicated electronic ones. There's going to be whole banks of hacked software where you can keep your Hyundai Ioniq going. I think there's quite a famous example. I think McLaren they've got some 1992 IBM laptop running Windows 3.1 or something like that, because it's the only thing that will run the software on a McLaren F1. Right. You literally can't run the diagnostic software on anything newer than that. And there's the whole historical racing scene. Basically, anybody now who's keeping a 1990s Formula One car going has got the same issue. Those are not simple cars, and there'll always be that group of people that helps to keep that stuff going. So I don't think it is going to be an issue. And yes, it'll become more hobby-like to do that.
I noticed something a bit interesting that's not exactly car related, but possibly what you're talking about there. And it's the pit walls. When you look at the pit walls and you look at the buttons and everything they're pressing, and I have no idea whatsoever about the technology that's behind any of this. But it occurred to me that when I went to a Grand Prix and I was on a pit wall, nothing's changed. It all looks the same, and maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe the technology is exactly the same because it's better. It was, it's better than it would be if you try to digitalize it or something. Digitize it. Sorry. I mean, I've no idea. It might be. I don't know how it all works, but I just thought everything looks the same than it did like 20 years ago when I was at a Grand Prix on a pit wall. So
exactly, yeah. If it's not broke, and I think. Yeah, there's no reason to change something that works perfectly well. But I think go back to what we mentioned a little while ago about like obviously cameras, but also LPs. And no, Joe, you're kind of into your old LPs and that. And there's something really appealing about listening to the original or having the actual LP rather than just downloading something off the internet, isn't there? In music terms.
Yeah, it's that sort of tactile. You got something to hold. You got something you actually have to put it on the record player and move the needle across. You actually have to get it almost involved in the process rather than just press a button and it plays a random playlist or something. And it makes you sit down and actually listen to the music.
Yeah,
which you wouldn't otherwise. In the same way, it becomes background music, and that's not. Music is better than that. Music you can actually sit down and listen to and just listen to it.
Yeah, exactly. And an album being played in order because that's the tape that you've put in. And you can't just skip a track because it doesn't work like that. You've got to fast forward and hope. But I'm going to go to Cami here because Cami, for me, you're my tech wizard. Whenever I need to know anything about a graphics card or a power input for a PC, I come to you. Is there something appealing to you about the analog era of technology, or do you think that the new digital stuff is going to keep progressing to such a level that we won't miss the old stuff?
It's difficult to say. I think there'll be a nostalgia for the old stuff, certainly. I think people who just want to use it for what it's for, so like I just want to get from A to B, they're not going to be fussed about whether I can repair this car and all such. But I think you'll always have like 5% or something of the population who are enthusiasts. So when it comes to computers and such, it's difficult. And as computers integrate into cars, what will happen is 20 years after that car's been released, if the company goes out of business and their website doesn't exist and that car needs an update, it's like when you've got an old computer and I can't update it because the website doesn't exist. Therefore, I can't use it anymore. It's completely redundant. Or games that rely on that.
There'll be kind of random people off the internet who will be able to kind of produce third-party software that will keep this stuff going. Will there be a market for keeping your Audi A4 going? Because Audi doesn't support it anymore, but so-and-so guy from Cambodia has figured out some software to be able to do it, and you can go and download his software.
Look up Commodore 64 software on the internet and you'll see the answer. You can connect a Commodore 64 to the internet if you really want to, with software that people are still hacking around with and downloading.
I just imagine there could be lawsuits of, let's say Audi still exist at that point, and they're saying, well, we don't support it and we don't want to support it. And then somebody else says, well, I've made a file that will work. Audi might say, right, well, you're playing with our intellectual property and, that we own that code and it's our choice not to update it, because ultimately they would want you to buy the new car rather than updating and support it. It's the same as Windows don't support Windows XP anymore. Somebody could write an update for Windows XP and Microsoft would say, nope, you're infringing on our property. So I think there'll be a niche market, and that'll probably be a lawsuit for the future of people trying to keep old cars going. And it wouldn't surprise me also if cars went the way of iPhones, where they try and make them harder to repair yourself.
Yeah, they have an inbuilt obsolescence that kind of after a few years they kind of they kind of go away. But I
Or,
think
or the manufacturers realize how to monetize it in the same way that I think
Yeah.
Mazda have started remaking parts for the original NA MX-5s and stuff like that. But again, that's more likely for desirable cars than it is for your run-of-the-mill Nissan Micras and stuff.
Yeah.
yeah.
When
Yeah.
when we're talking about electric cars, because I don't know much about those, I'm kind of thinking or guessing that they're the kind of cars that you might not be able to tinker around with yourself. Am I right with that? Or
I imagine with the high voltage and something, it's not quite something you can just. You might have to have like an electrician's certification or something to.
But that
handle
will
it.
exist. People might have said the same about internal combustion engines. How dangerous would it be to deal with explosions inside some sort of metal container? Oh my God, that sounds really scary. But people created it. Engineers created it. They designed it. Other people can still work on it. So I think maybe in time, what we perhaps think of, oh my God, if Audi doesn't support the A4 anymore, that might be a bad thing. Well, there'll be other people that can figure it out that don't work for Audi, that could work for Audi, but they don't, and so perhaps that will become available. So we can't tell the future. There's always a way. I'm sure humanity will find a way to keep these things going. But I know, Ian, you were perhaps kind of talking more about in the past about cars and worrying about more about parts supply rather than software and that kind of thing, and where these parts are going to come from. Because although craftspeople can make a new bumper out of chrome, that's sort of perhaps a bit easy. But if you need to create a very specific, intricate part, is that where the problems could perhaps come?
Yeah, I mean, you think the amount of sensors in a modern car, but I've also discovered myself that sometimes it's easier to run cars from the 60s, 70s, and 80s than it is more modern cars, because the product ranges are now so wide because every manufacturer builds to every market sector, and parts are so unique to cars. So I was shocked when I had a Vauxhall Omega at one point to discover that the suspension springs for it are no longer available because it had self-leveling rear suspension. I'm thinking, well, I can get almost every part I need for my Citroen 2CV, Morris Minors, Triumph Herald, and so many of the parts are interlinked. They're just general Lucas items, so they fit several different cars. So even my ancient Invacar, a car with a fairly small production run of about 8,000, you can get all the bits because they're just off-the-shelf bits of mainstream cars. And I think in the future that is going to start becoming a problem because brake discs end up being so tailored to a car, calipers and suspension components. So that's what worries me almost more than the electronic side of things.
Well, the one thing that's going to sort of put my car into the grave is actually the electric side, and it's the sensor side. Mine's a 99 Volvo V70, and I'm really sure almost everything's been disconnected in that car now because they're telling me that it's too hard to find. The fault's too hard to find. I've been through so many batteries in the last few years. It's a joke. I've spent more money on batteries than the car's worth, just because of the drains that are going on it, and they can't really specifically find everything. So I've had things like, luckily my windows are still going, but even my internal locking system now doesn't work, and that's actually a safety hazard. I'd like to lock myself into my car when I'm driving around late at night somewhere, and that's one thing that's I've actually I'm looking to change it now. I'm looking to switch it out because I can't get somebody to fix it. And it's such a shame because that's probably just going to go to the scrapyard, and it's a beautiful car, it runs so amazingly.
Yeah, it's the tricky thing. If it's like almost like a computer says no element, isn't it? If they plug it in, they can't figure out what's wrong. They kind of give up on the thing, I suppose, which is a shame, and it wouldn't have been the case in the past. But I mean, these are problems not for us to solve, of course, and I would like to hear what other people think about where things are going. But it's it's intriguing to think about, are these issues that we're having right? Oh, not issues, but are these problems that we perhaps foresee now the same problems that people were foreseeing 30 years ago and didn't turn out to be a problem at all because aftermarket firms and clever people came on board and sorted out these problems.
Can I make a prediction? Sorry, can I make one prediction?
Yeah.
I think in the future, you won't buy a car, you won't hire a car like on a rental lease hire plan. I think like phones and agreements, you'll pay for the car 20 grand and they'll say you are licensed to use the car. It's not your car and you're not eligible to make changes to the car as per the license agreement. We are the same way as you click agree when you use Microsoft Office. You don't own it. You just have permission to use it. I think cars will go that way at some point.
What do you think about that, Neil? Do you think that could be this sort of subscription route? Is that how personal mobility is going to go? You know, cars perhaps will kind of change in the sort of definition of what we think of a car, maybe. But do you think it's going to be more about you need a car, and so you kind of you're allowed to use the network of cars if you've opted in?
Yeah, there's a lot of chatter about that at the moment. I was talking to Klaus Selmer recently, who's the new head of global sales at Volkswagen, and they are kind of preparing for both eventualities in that they're pushing very hard down this whole idea of subscriptions and you just literally you press a button on your phone and a car arrives at your door. But obviously that relies on level 5 autonomous driving effectively. You know, it's not something that works with cars that you have to go and sit in and drive yourself. So they are also saying, no, look, there will always be a market for people who want to lease, to buy, to own, to drive. And so they're not saying we're going to bin steering wheels next week or next year or next decade or whatever. But yeah, that subscription model. Now, the only thing that gives me slight pause about that is it all sounds fine up to a point, and it all sounds great, and everyone's saying it. I do wonder sometimes how much people are saying it in order to keep the investment side of things happy. There is definitely a feeling in the air that, for want of a better phrase, the Wall Street types like to hear that kind of thing and like to put their money into companies that are saying that kind of thing when those companies might not necessarily believe it fully. Okay. Maybe.
And if it does come to that point, then surely there's still plenty of room for people who like to drive. I mean, Chris, I can't imagine you'll ever want to be in a place where you can't go for a quick black down a B road.
No, I love driving. If I get the opportunity to go for a drive for fun, I'll take it. It's part of me. I've grown up that way, and I'm sure it's the same with Ian and Simon and Neil. We're, you know, car enthusiasts. We love everything about it. It's
we're not typical there. Mm-hmm. We're not the typical people. Most people already, run a car according to the monthlies. They finance them according to the monthlies. It's not a massive jump between that and a subscription service.
Right.
People basically decide how much they're prepared to shell out every month for that car. Most people who end up just using a company car, basically they'll just take whatever they're given. They're given an option of 2 or 3 different cars, and half of them don't even care which of the 2 or the 3 that they take. They just know how much is coming off their pre-tax every month, and they know that they've got a car. So subscription works just fine for those people, and it's not. It frees us up to buy whatever we want, as long as those cars are still available somewhere.
I can see 2 things happening. I see 2 things happening with it. My father and mother-in-law have gone from having a new BMW X3 and a Z4 to now just owning an electric Kia. I don't even know what model it is. I have no idea. It doesn't interest me in the slightest. But they love it. It does exactly what they need. They've got enough space. Takes them from A to B. They can go shopping. They can go and see their kids. You can go and see the grandkids, and that's all that matters to them. They've gone through having the car that was fun to drive, and actually they decided they didn't use it very often because it just wasn't practical for them. So they've gone down the electric car route, and they're loving it. And I think a lot of people are going to be like that. I hope that people still drive for fun, and that we'll still have sports cars, and we'll still have the hot hatches, and we'll still have, the cars that are made for the pure enjoyment of driving. But I can see that a lot of people, it's just a tool. It's just a way and means of getting from A to B. And then talking about the other side with like classic cars and motorsport and stuff, I recently sat in Ari Vatanen's seat in a 405 T16 Pikes Peak hill climb car. And they have actually ripped out all the old electronics out of that, taken all of the old stuff because nothing works. They can't communicate with any modern computers or any modern software. They've had to just rip the whole lot out and start again with modern ECUs. But it actually means the car runs way better than it ever has. They don't have any issues with overheating or problems which potentially they could have had with the old thing. It's actually making old cars more reliable and actually keeping them going. So
and that's a car from 1988. We're talking about modern electronics as if it's some new thing. It's actually something I wanted to ask Ian. Those electronic digital dashboard Metros and Maestros and stuff from the 1980s, how are people keeping those running? I mean, it's also fragile old electronics. People are somehow managing to keep that running, or are they ripping those dashboards out and putting analogs?
No. People very much want the originality, so people do find out how these things work. We're already seeing on cars like the first generation smart cars terrible problems with the ECUs and going down, and a lot of the time it's the solder just goes. So there's a specialist market in people who will take your ECU and redo all the solder to make it work again. So the world does respond to the requirements to sort of help keep these cars going. But it is noticeable when you go to museums that quite often the older cars are easier for them to get restarted than some of the modern cars, because the modern cars just can't really cope with sitting around having no use and then suddenly being called upon, whereas the older cars tend to be a bit more a bit easier. I mean, you can run an old engine with just a 12-volt feed and a bit of petrol, so you haven't got to worry about sensors, ECUs talking to each other. It's a lot easier. So the modern stuff tends to just get moved around by machine, and the older cars, they can fire up and drive them.
That's what we need to. We all need to get really old cars from the 40s or something like that, and we'll never have a problem. LA, you won't ever have to buy a battery again. You'll be fine.
Something with a hand crank.
Yeah. Before we go, because I know we've gone way past 9 o'clock as we always do. Neil, I just want to get a bit of an understanding. You know the UK car industry and community really well. You also know obviously Israel incredibly well. How do they differ in terms of the attitude towards driving and the attitude towards the future of autonomy and electric cars and that kind of thing? How do the UK and Israel differ?
That's actually a really interesting question, because Israel doesn't have the same car culture that Britain, Europe, the States has. Back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when E-types and all that kind of stuff were out, there was none of that stuff here. So there isn't the reservoir of old cars here. Back then, people were at best driving a Peugeot 403, a 404, or a Fiat 127. And there wasn't that car culture, and there still isn't really a car culture. When I talked about, most people here get a company car from work. They get a Toyota Corolla or a Hyundai Ioniq. They take 1,400 shekel off them a month for the leasing company, and that's what they drive. But there is still that subculture of people who like cars. There's a lot right now of people importing older cars, especially from the States, where you can pick them up relatively cheaply. But the reason it's an interesting question is because despite that, or perhaps because of that, Israel is really becoming a center for a lot of these next technologies in terms of cars. Kind of the Tel Aviv area, next to kind of Silicon Valley, is the place for autonomous cars and for electric cars and for all this kind of, in terms of the development of both the software and the hardware that's going into that. Companies like Mobileye that developed the camera navigation systems and all this kind of stuff. And perhaps one of the reasons for that is actually that there isn't the car culture here. So these are people who are very much focused on the science of can we, and of just wanting to get from A to B. And Tel Aviv is a horribly congested city where there's no parking, and people just want to find a way to get through it and to get out of it. And so that kind of stuff's getting developed here. And all the car companies are coming here for that. GM employs, I think, 700 people in Tel Aviv, in their R&D center in Tel Aviv. All of that future tech is actually getting done here. And as I say, you may be surprised how few of the people involved in that are what we would consider to be car people.
Right.
They're not. They're software people. They're high tech people. They're very innovative, but they're trying. They're mobility people rather than car people.
So does that mean that because there's no kind of traditional culture, would there be an even greater impact? Say if Sai drove through Tel Aviv in his pink Cadillac Eldorado, would that cause an even greater stir, do you think?
Oh, yes, it does. I know, my kids, because they're my kids, they're into their cars and that kind of stuff. And my youngest, he's constantly sending me photographs on WhatsApp of the cool car that he saw. And sometimes it's stuff that even I'm like, it's really not that cool. It's and then I'm like, you know what? It's okay, fair enough, fair dues. You've seen a Pontiac Fiero parked in an underground car park, and I'm suddenly goes, you know what? That's that kind of stuff does stand out here. And there are meets here of there are classic car meets here all the time of that kind of stuff. And because that stuff is rarer, it becomes more special. And in a lot of ways, to bring it back full circle, it's the ordinary stuff which really stands out. It's just a Peugeot 205 that's still got a bit of rust on the wings that somebody's keeping going, or a Peugeot 404, or somebody will bring in I've got a friend actually who's got a 1985 Golf GTI, which was imported from Italy, because there just weren't, there were a few here, but there weren't that many of them here. And again, it's not a concourse car. It was a living, breathing car, and there's plenty of that kind of stuff here. Kind of the ordinary does stand out.
That's what we need. We need a festival of the unexceptional over in Israel.
Yeah, I can send you pictures. There's every month there's a meet here. And the stuff that people show up in is really relatively ordinary. I mean, it'll be like an Opel Kadett B and that kind of stuff. It's again not in concourse condition. The guy basically drives it every week, and stuff like that.
Sounds like you need to set up a YouTube channel there for us lot to see stuff that you see. That sounds like a really, really good idea.
I can point you other places. There's what it's known as here actually is the Number 5 Club, because registration numbers here are all digits, and basically up until 1970 they were 5 digits. And so originally the Number 5 Club was you had a 5-digit number plate, which meant you had a classic car. Nowadays classic car qualifies right up until 1990, but they still call it the number 5 Club. And they're a very enthusiastic bunch of people, and there are some really very special cars. Mostly relatively recent imports, but not all.
I think Niam might be trolling us here. If we go over to Israel and say, I want to go to the Number 5 Club, we end up in some sort of seedy establishment. But yeah, no, it sounds good. It's been fascinating, as always, to talk to you guys about the past, the future, the present of cars. And I'd like to thank Ian for coming along. Really short notice for you, Ian. You kind of, until earlier on today, you weren't sure you were even going to come along. So it's been fantastic to have you along and talk about what you're up to, your YouTube channel. So to find you on YouTube, do people just search for Hubnut? Or
search for Hubnut, that should do it. Yep.
Great. We'll all kind of find you on there. I'm sure we all follow you already on Twitter and such anyway. But for now, I mean, we're nearly 9:30 now, so it's probably best to wrap it up for now. The next ZoomZoomers will be on the 2nd of August, the day after my birthday, guys. So bear that in mind.
2nd of August. Mine's a
hint.
Mine's a few days after that. That's both.
LA, August, babies. High five. But yeah, thanks again to everyone for coming along today. It's been absolutely fantastic. I love these every first Monday of the month. It's great to see you all, and hope to see you online. Obviously, the best way to get in touch with most of us is on Twitter. If you want to chuck a general question at us or ask anything about ZoomZoomers, Chris will be on the Twitter and the channel and everything like that. So throw some questions at ZoomZoomers. Use the hashtag ZoomZoomers. On YouTube, of course, feel free to subscribe. That makes such a big difference to us. And leave a comment and like the video. Have a look through the previous videos we've got there. It all makes a great difference. And until next month, then, until August. Wow, we're whizzing through these again. That's it from July's ZoomZoomers, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you, everybody.